Hello and welcome to Cooking with Anand. Today we are making Saag Paneer, and saag is a creamy spinach sauce, and paneer are little cubes of cheese that are typically eaten in India with a lot of different things like tikka or like other curries. So the first thing you're going to want to do is bring your milk to a boil in a large pot, and then once it comes to a little bit of a boil and you see bubbles coming up, you're going to want to add in some acid so it will curdle. So I've turned off the heat and now I'm going to add in some lemon juice. You can also use like some sort of vinegar like rice wine vinegar, maybe apple cider vinegar. If you use something that's more pungent, eventually you're going to want to rinse the finished paneer so that it kind of loses that flavor a little bit. So anyway, I'm just going to add this in while stirring. And so we've turned... And so immediately you will pretty much start to see little curds forming. So you just want to keep completely stir in and you'll see little curds forming. So that's the cheese that will eventually become paneer. So now you just want to let it sit for about 5 minutes, still off the heat, and don't stir it because you want to let those curds form, and then we will turn into paneer. Now there are large curds that have formed in the milk, and they've kind of coagulated together a little bit. So what we have here is a cheesecloth that is over a sturdy strainer, and so we are going to try to strain off all of the clear liquid. So there's the cheese part, and then there's the like kind of yellowish colored liquid that settles around it. So we're gonna get rid of that liquid and then form the cheese into a block, which is what we need the cheesecloth for. So now that you have this kind of loose mass of curds that are in this cheesecloth, you're gonna wanna let the water drip off for just a few more minutes. If your bowl gets full of the hot liquid, then you can pour it out and put it back on so that it's not sitting in the liquid as it's trying to be strained. And we're just gonna let it cool down for a little bit so we can handle it a little more. So it's been a few minutes and the curds have cooled down a little bit and most of the liquid has been removed. So what I did is I just kind of folded the cheesecloth over the top of it and patted it down a little bit with my hand to start forming it into its round shape. And so now we're just going to transfer it out of the strainer onto a baking sheet of some sort here. So it'll still be pretty loose at this point. And now what you want to do is there's still a lot of liquid in here that's like a bit hidden. So you just want to take a weight of some sort and put it on top and leave it like that for about 20 or 30 minutes until it firms up a bit, and you can just kind of test the texture of it every once in a while to make sure it's a little bit firm. So before we start actually cooking the spinach with the other things and pureeing it, we need to wilt it a little bit. So I have a little bit of water in a pot here, and I'm just going to add in the spinach into the pot and on the stove around the pot as well. There we go. And now I have some oil in a saucepan over here, and I'm going to turn the heat onto like medium-high heat and add in some garlic, ginger, and onions. And you don't have to chop any of these aromatics that much because we are eventually going to process the mixture in a food processor. However, if you like your sauce a little bit chunkier, you can always just chop them a little fine here and then you don't have to puree it later. So you want to cook these until they start getting some color like this. So if you look here, they're just a little bit brown, and that's perfect. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add in our spices. So we have garam masala, coriander, and cumin. So we are going to add those in. And so you just want to cook these in the oil until they get just a little bit toasted. And that'll bring out some extra flavor. So after about 2 minutes of stirring the spices in the hot onions and oil, you should be smelling like a little bit of nuttiness, and the flavor of the spices should really be like spread across the air. So now these are ready, and you're going to want to transfer them to your food processor. And as for the spinach, you should just boil it after it's wilted for about 5 minutes. So that huge pile of spinach should just become a tiny bit of spinach, and it should be very wilted and tender. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to blend the spinach along with the water that was used to cook it, the remaining water, and the onions and garlic. And you can blend it as long as you want. If you want it really smooth, you can blend it for a really long time, but if you want it to be a little bit more coarse, you can just blend it for a few seconds or pulse it a few times so that it combines and becomes a little bit soft. So at this point, it'll still be a little bit liquidy, so you're going to want to cook this mixture over the heat and let it boil for about 5 minutes. So this has been sitting for a little bit, so we're going to take off the weights, and now it's a little bit of a solid block. You want to make sure you don't leave it too long, because even though it'll be easier to cut, it'll be more solid. It'll get a little bit rubbery if you let it sit too long. So now we have this block of paneer, and now we can cut it. So I've cut up the paneer into little cubes. I think it's better to have them a little smaller because then I have more surface area that can be fried in the oil. So now I have some oil, and I'm just using the same pan that I used for the onions because everything is going to get mixed together eventually anyway. And we're just going to fry them in the oil a little bit until they have a little bit of brown color on all sides, and then we'll be able to move on. While the paneers are in the oil, I'm just going to turn back to the sauce, which has now been boiling for a little while. And I'm going to add in some heavy cream. You can skip this ingredient if you want and just have the sauce as is, but I feel like it's nice for the sauce to be a little bit creamier. You can also add in yogurt as a replacement, that also works. So yeah, now we're just going to continue to boil it until it's reached the thickness that we want. So now that the paneer has gotten a little bit toasted on all the sides, we're going to add in some spices. So we have turmeric, cayenne, and salt, and we're just going to toast that in with the paneer so that those can also get a little bit of flavor and they can coat the paneer. And I know cayenne is not a traditional Indian spice, but it'll work in this recipe to give it just a little bit of spice. Okay, so to this spinach sauce, I'm going to add just a little bit of salt and pepper, and you can always taste it and adjust the seasoning in it if need be. And now that that's done, we can add in the paneer. So the paneer should turn a little bit yellow because of the turmeric, and we're just going to add that into the saag and mix it up, and that'll be it. So now you're just going to want to plate it up, and you can serve it with a side of rice or naan, either of which would be what would be traditionally served in Indian dinner. So we have one of each because we like to be diverse. And that's it. So if you want to make variations to this recipe, some things you can do are you could substitute the spinach for other leafy greens. So in India, saag can be made with all sorts of stuff. Like if you wanted to use kale or mustard greens or whatever comes to mind, or if you just have leftover greens. And like I said before, you can have variations on the cream that you add, so you can add cream or yogurt. And then for paneer, if you don't like paneer, you can also use tofu or just eat it plain as a sauce, and that also works well. So thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.